The scent of cinnamon and damp earth always brings it back. Not the mansion, not the vast, echoing halls or the cold, polished marble, but the kitchen. It was a kingdom of warmth tucked into the corner of that cold, sprawling estate, and its ruler was Elias. Elias was a man built from the soil of the Shenandoah Valley. His hands, wide and calloused as shovel blades, could gentle a skittish foal or mend a broken fence post with equal, quiet certainty. When the young, widowed tech millionaire, Mr. Thorne, hired him, it wasn't just to tend the grounds of Whispering Pines. Thorne, adrift in a sea of quarterly reports and grief, had looked into Elias's steady gray eyes and said, "The children, too, they need solid things, things that grow." And so Elias came. He brought his overalls, his slow Virginia drawl, and a single weathered suitcase. The mansion, a monument of glass and steel, seemed to shiver at his arrival. To 8-year-old Lily and 5-year-old Leo, he was a creature from another world. They watched, silent as shadows from the grand staircase, as he methodically unpacked his meager possessions in the gardener's cottage. He placed a framed photo of a woman with a kind smile on the nightstand, a well-thumbed Bible beside it, and a small, smooth stone from a riverbed on the windowsill. The first week was a dance of distances. The children ate their chef-prepared meals at a table that could seat 20, their small voices lost in the cavernous dining room. Elias ate his beans and cornbread in the cottage. He worked, his back bent over flower beds, pruning shears snick-snacking in the quiet. Lily, a watcher, noticed he hummed the same tune, a hymn her mother had sometimes sung. The connection began, as such things often do, with a small kindness. Leo, chasing a mechanical drone, tripped on the immaculate patio, scraping his knee raw on the flagstones. His wail was one of shock and indignation. The housekeeper fluttered. The chef offered ice cream. But Elias, from across the lawn, simply stood, wiped his hands on his trousers, and walked over. He didn't swoop or fuss. He knelt, his knees popping like twigs. "Well now," he rumbled, his voice like stones in a creek, "let's see the battlefield." He produced a red bandana from his pocket, clean but soft from 100 washings. With a tenderness that belied his rough hands, he dabbed at the grit. "A scratch like this needs 2 things," he said, meeting Leo's tear-filled eyes. "A bit of cleaning and a story." As he told a tale about a young fox who tripped over a roots and still managed to catch the cleverest rabbit, Leo's sobs subsided. The bandana was tied, a humble flag over the wound. Lily, watching from the kitchen doorway, saw something shift. This was not the transactional care of hired staff. This was different. The next day, Elias was weeding the vegetable patch he'd insisted on planting. "A house needs things you can eat," he'd told a bemused Mr. Thorne. Lily approached, holding a sketchbook. "Do you like tomatoes?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Best thing the sun ever made," he said, not looking up, giving her space. "I drew one." She held out the page. It was a careful, detailed study of a tomato on the vine, complete with a curled, fuzzy stem and a ladybug. Elias stopped. He took the book, holding it carefully by the edges. He studied it for a long moment, the morning light catching the silver in his stubble. "You got the light right," he said finally, pointing a thick finger at the highlight on the fruit's curve. "See how it sits there, all soft and hopeful? You have a C in heart, Lily girl." No one had ever called her that. No one had ever looked at her drawing and seen light. She began to trail after him, her sketchbook capturing the curve of a pumpkin, the intricate lace of a spider web jeweled with dew. He became her living, breathing, still life subject. Then came the rain, a torrential, endless downpour that flooded the creek and knocked out the power. The mansion, stripped of its humming technology, became a dark, chilly shell. The generator failed. Panic, silent but palpable, threaded through the staff. Mr. Thorne was stranded in Hong Kong. Elias appeared at the kitchen door, a dripping oilskin coat over his shoulders. "Well," he said, his calm voice cutting through the anxiety, "we'll be needin' a fire and some proper fuel." He marshaled them. He showed Leo how to crumple newspaper just so for kindling. He directed Lily to gather all the candles from the sconces and drawers. In the vast, seldom-used living room with its colossal stone fireplace, he built a blaze that crackled and roared, beating back the dark and the damp. The light danced on the high ceilings, making giants of their shadows. "Now," Elias said, clapping his hands once, "a storm like this calls for supper by the fire, and I reckon I'm in charge of that." He led them back to the kitchen, lit by hurricane lamps. He bypassed the sous vide machine and the espresso maker. From the pantry he pulled oats, a few apples, a sack of brown sugar, from his own garden a jar of dried rosemary. "Apple oatmeal," he declared, "my Marcy's recipe." He put Leo in charge of measuring oats, his small tongue poking out in concentration. Lily sliced apples, the knife thunk, thunk rhythmically on the board. The smell of cooking oats, sweet apple, and earthy rosemary filled the kitchen, a scent 1,000 times more comforting than any hired chef's complex reductions. They ate it from mismatched bowls, sitting on cushions by the fire, the storm raging impotently outside their circle of light. For the first time since their mother died, the house didn't feel empty. It felt full of warmth, of crackling sound, of simple, steaming food. That night was the turning point. The "but one day" wasn't a dramatic betrayal or a hidden secret. It was the day the humble farmer stopped being hired help and became the center. Rituals grew, soft as moss over stone. Saturday mornings were for baking. Elias taught him his mother's cinnamon roll recipe, the one that required the dough to rise twice, teaching patience. Lily would paint the melted butter on the dough rectangle with a pastry brush, her movements precise. Leo's job was the grand, messy shower of cinnamon and sugar. Elias's hands, capable of hefting 50-pound feed sacks, would roll the dough into a perfect, snug log, then slice it with gentle certainty. The first time Mr. Thorne returned from a trip to the smell of baking cinnamon and his children's flour-dusted faces, he stood in the doorway, his tailored suit seeming out of place. Leo ran to him, shoving a gooey, too-hot roll into his hand. "We made it, Daddy. Elias showed us." Thorne ate it, the icing sticking to his fingers, a foreign sensation. He looked at Elias, who gave a small, silent nod. Something deep in the millionaire's chest, a knot of grief and worry he'd carried for years, loosened just a little. The seasons turned under Elias's care. Autumn was for raking enormous leaf piles that the children leapt into, their shrieks piercing the crisp air, and for roasting pumpkins they had grown themselves. Winter was for stringing popcorn and cranberries for the birds, Elias telling stories of winters so cold the pond froze clear through. Spring was for the feverish planning of the garden, seed catalogs spread across the kitchen table, Lily drawing elaborate layouts, Leo insisting on planting watermelon the size of a car. One spring afternoon, a crisis struck. Lily, now 12, had a disastrous presentation at her prestigious school. A group project had fallen apart, leaving her humiliated. She came home, threw her backpack, and fled to the only place that felt safe, Elias's potting shed. He found her there, hunched on an upturned bucket, angrily deadheading geraniums. He didn't ask. He sat on a sack of potting soil, picked up a trowel, and started repotting a fern. The only sounds were the rustle of peat moss, the distant call of a robin, and Lily's shaky breaths. "You know," he said after a long while, his eyes on his work, "the first garden I ever planted on my own got hit by hail just as the tomatoes were coming in, shredded every leaf to green lace. I sat right down in the mud and cried. Felt like the whole world was just mean." Lily looked up, her eyes red. "What did you do?" "I cried till I was done," he said simply. "Then I got up, cleared the wreckage, and planted some late-season greens. Wasn't the garden I planned, but it was still a garden, still fed me. He looked at her then. You're allowed to sit in the mud, Lily girl. Just don't build your house there. He handed her a packet of seeds. Sunflowers. They grow tall and face the light. Seems like you could use some. They planted them together along the sunny fence line, pushing the large seeds into the dark soil. It was an act of faith. The final thread in the tapestry was Mr. Thorne himself. The millionaire, for all his wealth, lived in a world of abstractions, algorithms, market shares, digital networks. One evening, he found Elias on the back porch, shelling peas into a metal bowl, the plink-plink, a soft, percussive music. Thorne, tired and restless, sat beside him. For a few minutes they sat in silence, the only sound the peas hitting the bowl. How do you do it, Elias? How do you just know what to do with the land, with the children, with everything? It all seems so clear for you. Elias set a pod aside, his movements slow. Well, sir, he said, the land and children aren't so different. They both tell you what they need if you're quiet enough to listen. You can't force a seed to sprout. You can't shout a tomato into ripening. You provide the good soil, the steady water, the protection from the worst of the storms. You pull the weeds that choke, and then you wait. You have faith in the growing. He handed him a pea pod. Here, try shelling. It gives your hands work so your mind can rest. Thorne, his accustomed to keyboards and touchscreens, fumbled with the pod. The first few peas shot out, skittering across the porch floor. Elias chuckled, a low, warm sound. Easy now, it's not a board meeting. Slowly, Thorne got the hang of it. The rhythmic, simple task was strangely calming. Plink, plink, plink. The green pile grew in the bowl between them. In that quiet, shared labor, the last of the walls came down. The millionaire and the farmer weren't employer and employee. They were just two men, side by side, providing for a family they both loved. Years later, long after the children were grown, the mansion felt different. It was still impressive, but its heart was no longer in the grand entrance or the pricey art. Its heart was in the kitchen, now permanently smelling of rosemary and baked apples. Its heart was in the thriving vegetable garden and the towering sunflowers that reseeded themselves every year. Its heart was in a framed, childish drawing of a tomato that hung in Elias's cottage, right beside the photo of his Marcy. When Lily graduated from art school, her first solo exhibition was titled A Seeing Heart. The central piece was a portrait of weathered, soil-caked hands cradling a single perfect cinnamon roll. The caption read, "The greatest wealth is not in what you keep, but in what you give to grow." And when Leo, now an environmental engineer, spoke at his wedding, he held up a faded red bandana, neatly folded. "This," he said, his voice thick, "was my first lesson in resilience, that the gentlest hands are often the strongest, and that true care doesn't just bandage a wound, it gives you a story to carry you through the next fall." Mr. Thorne, his hair now gray, sat between Elias and his expanding family at the reception. He looked around at the laughter, the connections, the love that had grown from the simple, solid seed of a humble farmer's kindness. He reached over and squeezed Elias's shoulder, the gesture saying everything words could not. The story was never about a millionaire and a farmer. It was about a house that became a home because someone remembered that life, in the end, grows not from marble but from soil, is sustained not by grandeur but by shared meals, and finds its hope not in wealth but in the quiet daily acts of planting, tending, and waiting together for the sun to rise.